The night was silent on the ranch. The only sound came from the soft rustling of dry grass as the wind moved across the empty fields. John sat in his wooden chair by the fire, staring at the orange flames. His face was lined with years of loneliness, his hands rough from endless work. He had left the wars behind long ago, trading the sound of gunfire for the quiet life of cattle and open skies. But sometimes the silence felt heavier than the battles he once fought. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. John leaned back, eyes half closed, when a sudden knock thundered through the stillness. His heart jumped. No one came here. His ranch was miles away from the nearest town. For years he had lived without a single visitor. Yet now someone was pounding on his door with desperate force. He grabbed the shotgun that rested near the wall. Old habits from war never left him. Moving quietly, he stepped across the creaking floorboards and approached the door. The knocking grew louder, almost frantic. Then came voices, soft, trembling, almost pleading. He could not understand the words at first, but the tone was unmistakable. Fear. John pulled the door open with one swift motion. His eyes widened. Standing in the rain were 11 alien women, their skin pale under the moonlight, their clothes torn and soaked. Their large, shining eyes locked onto him as if he were their last hope. They looked exhausted, their bodies shivering from the cold night wind. The tallest one stepped forward, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Please, we beg you, shelter us." For a long moment, John said nothing. His grip on the shotgun tightened. He had fought aliens before, killed them in wars he no longer wished to remember. He had sworn to never again be part of their conflicts. Yet here they stood, fragile, desperate, and clearly running from something worse. The leader's voice cracked again. "They will find us. Please, human. We have nowhere else to go." Rain poured harder, dripping from the women's faces. One of them clutched a small bundle wrapped in cloth, holding it close to her chest like it was the most precious thing in the world. John's eyes flickered to it, then back to their faces. 11 pairs of eyes begged him, and behind them, the dark field seemed alive with danger. He lowered the shotgun, but his voice stayed rough. "Who are you? Why my door?" The leader hesitated, her chest heaving. "We are widows. Our husbands were taken by war, killed by those who now hunt us. We refuse to serve as prizes for commanders. Now they want us dead." Her hand shook as she reached forward, but she quickly pulled it back, afraid to cross his threshold without permission. "You live far from their reach. We thought, maybe here." John's jaw clenched. He should shut the door. This wasn't his fight. He wanted nothing more than peace. But something in their eyes, the same hollow look he had seen in soldiers who had lost everything, stirred a memory inside him. He knew that look. He had worn it himself. Behind them, lightning flashed, and for a brief second, John thought he saw movement in the distance. His instincts screamed that someone was watching from the dark. His chest grew tight. Whoever these women were, they were being followed, and if he turned them away, death would surely claim them before dawn. He cursed under his breath and stepped aside. "Get in, quickly." Relief flooded their faces. They hurried through the doorway, dripping water onto the wooden floor. The smallest of them stumbled, and John caught her by the arm, steadying her. Her skin was cold, trembling under his hand. She looked up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes, whispering something in a language he didn't know. For the first time in years, his heart softened. When the last widow entered, John closed the door and locked it. The sound echoed through the quiet house, sealing them inside together. The room felt suddenly different, no longer empty, but heavy with fear, with secrets, with something that would not let him return to the silence he once knew. The leader bowed her head. "Thank you, human. You do not know what danger you risk, but tonight, you saved our lives." John said nothing. He only set the shotgun back against the wall and glanced once more at the bundle in the woman's arms. It shifted slightly, as if something alive rested within it. His stomach turned with unease. He had no idea what storm had just entered his home, but deep inside he knew one truth. His quiet, lonely life was over. The fire still burned low in the hearth, but the silence inside the ranch was gone. The 11 women sat close together, dripping water onto the wooden floor. Their strange garments clung to their thin frames, showing how long they had been running. John stood against the wall with his arms folded, watching them carefully. His house, once filled only with his own footsteps, now echoed with whispers in a language he barely understood. The leader, the tall woman with silver hair that glistened in the firelight, finally spoke again. Her voice was calm, but carried the weight of desperation. "We did not come to harm you. We came because there was nowhere else left. Every door is closed to us. Every hand is raised against us." Her eyes locked on John's. "And if you send us away, we will not see the next sunrise." John's jaw tightened. He had given them shelter for the night, but the question pressed heavy in his mind. Why him? Of all the places, why had they chosen his isolated ranch? He asked them directly, his tone sharp. "Why my land? Why my door?" The women looked at each other, hesitant, until one finally broke the silence. She was younger than the rest, her voice trembling. "Because you are human. Humans are outside the laws of our kind. They fear what they cannot control. Here, maybe, we could be safe." The words struck him like a cold blade. He had spent his whole life trying to escape the scars of being human in a galaxy that hated them, and yet to these women, his humanity was the one shield left. His eyes narrowed as he studied them again. Their faces were pale from exhaustion, but beneath the fear he saw something else. Trust. One of the widows pulled the cloth bundle tighter against her chest. John finally realized what it was. She unwrapped it slightly, revealing a small alien child, fast asleep, its skin faintly glowing in the firelight. The child's breathing was shallow, as if the long journey had almost taken its last strength. John stared at it in silence, his heart heavy. This was not just a group of widows. They carried innocence with them, a reason that hunters would never spare them. The leader noticed his stare and lowered her head. "Our husbands are dead. They were soldiers who refused to slaughter prisoners. For that, they were executed. We, their wives, were marked as traitors. Some of us were offered to commanders as spoils of war. We refused. So they hunt us instead." The fire cracked, filling the silence. John felt the memories clawing back into his mind. Battlefields, orders he never wanted to follow, comrades left behind because commanders treated men like tools, not lives. He thought he had buried all that in the soil of his ranch, but the widow's words dug it up again. "You should not have come here," he muttered. "If they find you, they'll burn this place to ash, and me with it." The leader's eyes glistened. She rose from where she sat, her hands trembling but steady enough to clasp together in front of her. "Then let us die with dignity under your roof, instead of like hunted animals in the fields." The other women looked down, silent, accepting her words as truth. The child shifted weakly, and its mother bent low to comfort it, humming a broken lullaby. The sound pierced John's chest like a knife. He had not heard a lullaby in years, not since his wife's voice had gone silent in the war. His breath caught. The years he had spent alone, pretending his heart had turned to stone, suddenly felt like nothing more than a cage he had built for himself. Now, inside his house, were faces that reminded him of everything he had once fought for: life, family, the right to exist without chains. John turned his back to them and walked toward the window. Outside, the land was still and dark, but something moved on the horizon, small flashes as if light reflected off metal in the distance. His instincts sharpened. He knew the hunters would come. Maybe not tonight, but soon. They were already close. He gripped the window frame, his knuckles white, then spoke without turning around. "You can stay for now, but understand this. If they come, I won't run, and neither will you." The room stayed silent, but he felt their eyes on him, heavy with both fear and hope. Somewhere behind him, the leader whispered words he almost didn't catch. "Then maybe we have found the one man who can save us." John closed his eyes. He didn't want to be anyone's savior, yet deep inside he knew he no longer had a choice. Morning light crept through the thin curtains, painting long stripes across the wooden floor. John stepped out onto the porch, the cool air brushing against his face. For years he had woken to silence, but now the ranch buzzed with strange life. He could hear soft voices inside the house, the alien women moving carefully as if afraid to disturb him. The smell of damp clothes hung in the air where they had laid their garments by the fire to dry. His peaceful world had shifted overnight, and nothing felt the same. As he fed the cattle, John kept glancing back at the house. The women had begun exploring, but they stayed close together, like a flock too frightened to scatter. They touched the wooden walls, the simple tools, the iron stove, as though these objects were treasures. One of them crouched beside a chicken, watching it with wide eyes, whispering something he couldn't understand. Another carried a bucket of water, stumbling under its weight but smiling when John didn't stop her. They were trying to be useful, trying to belong, yet their presence carried unease. At night, John heard them whispering in their alien tongue. Sometimes the whispers grew sharp, almost like arguments, then fell into silence when he stepped closer. He caught them looking at him with expressions that held more than gratitude, something like expectation, maybe even fear. He could not shake the feeling they knew more about him than they revealed. The bundle, the child, was his greatest concern. The small one slept most of the time, breathing shallow but steady. Its skin glowed faintly, a dim light that pulsed like a heartbeat. John had never seen such a thing in all his years of war. The mother guarded it fiercely, flinching whenever he came too close. He tried to ignore it, but the truth gnawed at him. Whatever the child was, it was the key to why they had chosen his door. By the third day, the ranch was no longer quiet. Tools went missing from the shed, found later in the hands of the widows who tried clumsily to help repair fences. The barn filled with low songs in a language that didn't belong to Earth. The cattle, uneasy with the strangers, shifted restlessly at night. Even the dogs barked more often, their noses raised toward the fields as if catching scents carried on the wind. Neighbors noticed. A man named Carl rode up on his horse one afternoon, his face creased with suspicion. John met him at the gate, arms folded. "You've got company," Carl said, squinting toward the house. "Heard strange voices. Folks in town are already talking." His tone carried warning, not curiosity. "Aliens on your land, John? That's dangerous. You don't know what kind they are." John's jaw hardened. He told Carl it was nothing, just travelers passing through. But the neighbor's eyes lingered on the shadows moving behind the curtains, and John knew gossip would spread. Isolation had protected him for years, but now his ranch was under watch. That night he sharpened an old knife at the table while the widows sat close together by the fire. They spoke in low tones, their faces grim. The leader finally looked at him, her voice steady but edged with fear. "They will come soon. Hunters always follow the scent. We only bought time by running." John met her gaze. "You brought danger to my land." "Yes," she admitted softly, "but danger follows us no matter where we go. At least here, we stand a chance." Lightning cracked outside the window, though the sky carried no storm. John rose, stepping onto the porch. In the far distance, across the fields, he saw it. Brief flickers in the sky like metal catching moonlight. He felt his chest tighten. The war he had abandoned was crawling back to him, step by step across his own soil. Behind him, the alien child stirred, glowing brighter than before. The mother hushed it with trembling hands, but John couldn't take his eyes off the light. Whatever that child was, it was a beacon, and beacons drew hunters. The quiet life he had clung to for years was slipping through his fingers. He could feel it in his bones, the same way he once felt battles before they began. The ranch was no longer just his home. It was becoming a battleground. The fourth night brought no peace. The dogs barked until their throats grew raw, pacing along the fence line with hackles raised. John sat on the porch with his shotgun across his knees, staring into the fields. The widows stayed inside, silent now, their whispers replaced by uneasy stillness. Even the child's glow dimmed, as if it sensed the danger pressing in from the dark. Then he saw them. Small red sparks drifting low across the horizon, weaving between the trees. Not fireflies, not lanterns. Scout drones. His stomach tightened. He had seen their kind during the war, machines that marked targets before the real hunters arrived. The war was coming back to his ranch step by step, and the women inside knew it. The leader appeared at the door, her eyes catching the glow of the sparks. "They found us," she whispered, her voice breaking for the first time. The other women crowded behind her, faces pale with fear. Some clutched each other. Some pressed hands to their mouths to keep from crying out. John's mind went cold, steady, the way it always had before a fight. He rose and spoke with a voice that cut through the panic. "Lock the doors. Stay away from the windows. If they want a war, they'll have to bleed for it." The leader stepped forward, desperation flashing in her eyes. "You don't understand. These hunters are not like men. They don't bargain. They don't forgive. Once they choose prey, they burn everything until nothing remains." Good, John muttered as he racked the shotgun, the metallic click echoing like thunder. Then they'll learn this land doesn't burn easy. The women fell silent. Some stared at him with disbelief, others with a strange, fragile hope. None moved to stop him as he marched to the barn. Dust-covered weapons he had sworn never to touch again. Grenades, trip mines, old field armor still bearing the marks of battle. He strapped the armor across his chest, the weight familiar and unwelcome. His hands shook only once, then steadied as years of muscle memory returned. He set traps along the fences, wiring explosives into the soil. He doused lanterns and pulled tarps over the cattle pens. By the time the first hunter ship glided low over the ranch, its engines whispering like ghosts, John was ready. The widows huddled together by the fire, listening to the faint hum outside. The child whimpered, its glow pulsing brighter with fear. The mother pressed it against her chest, rocking it, her own tears sliding silently down her cheeks. A shadow passed over the roof. The dogs erupted again. Then a beam of white light cut through the darkness, sweeping across the fields. The hunters were searching, mapping every corner. John crouched in the tall grass near the barn, the shotgun pressed tight against his shoulder. His heartbeat slowed, his breath steady. He waited until the light reached the traps he had buried. With one squeeze of a remote switch, the night erupted. The ground tore open, flames shooting skyward as one of the drones fell in pieces, raining sparks onto the soil. The silence that followed lasted only a breath. Then the hunters answered. Blue fire streaked down from the ship, scorching the earth where he had been seconds before. The barn wall exploded into splinters as John rolled into cover, firing back. His shot struck another drone, sending it crashing into the dirt. The ranch shook with every blast, the air thick with smoke and burning wood. Inside the house, the widows clung to each other, their faces lit by the glow of the child and the fire outside. They knew the human was out there alone, facing the storm they had dragged to his doorstep. For the first time, one of them whispered not in fear, but in awe. He fights for us. And in that moment, the ranch was no longer just a hiding place. It had become the front line. Smoke rolled across the fields, thick and bitter, turning the night into a blur of red and orange. John moved through it like a shadow, his boots pounding against the soil he had once tilled in peace. Every blast lit up his weathered face. Every explosion pulled another memory from the wars he thought he had buried. The hunters came fast, dropping from the hovering ship like armored predators. Their eyes glowed through dark masks, weapons humming with alien power. The first one landed near the cattle pen, its weapon raised. John fired before it touched the ground. The shotgun's roar split the night, and the hunter fell into the dirt, its armor sparking. More followed, their strange voices cutting through the air, a sharp, metallic language. The women inside the house cried out, their fear spilling into the smoke. John felt it fuel him, pushing him harder, steadier. He pulled the pin on a grenade and hurled it across the yard. The explosion lit the sky, throwing two hunters back in pieces. But the ship above answered with a beam of searing light that carved a burning line through his porch. Flames roared up, devouring the wood. His home, the one place he had kept safe from the galaxy, was burning before his eyes. He gritted his teeth and kept moving. Hunters swarmed the ranch, their sleek armor flashing in the firelight. John ducked behind a stone trough, that bullets and plasma bolts tearing the ground around him. He remembered training camps, remembered the first time he learned how to fire under pressure. His body moved without thought, reloading, aiming, striking. He was no longer just a farmer. The soldier inside him had woken, and the ranch became his battlefield. From inside the house, the widows did not stay still. The leader seized a fallen weapon through a shattered window and fired clumsily into the dark. Another dragged a wounded hunter's blade across the floor to John when he ducked back inside for a breath. Fear drove them, but so did desperation. They had lost too much already to let silence take them here. The smallest widow pressed her hands over the glowing child, whispering prayers as the roof rattled under another blast. The child's light pulsed brighter, strange energy flickering against the walls. For an instant, the hunters hesitated outside, their movements faltering as if the glow unsettled them. John caught it and seized the chance, cutting another down with a clean shot. The battle raged across every corner of the ranch. Flames climbed the barn, Animals scattered in terror, and the ground shook under the hunter's ship, but John refused to fall. He fought with the fury of a man who had nothing left to lose, every step fueled by years of silence now broken by the cries behind him. One hunter lunged from the smoke, blade raised. John met it head on, wrestling in the dirt. The alien's strength was brutal, pressing him down, the blade inching closer to his throat. Then a sharp cry split the night. The leader of the widows had left the house, clutching a broken staff from the barn. With a scream, she drove it into the hunter's side, just long enough for John to fire point blank. The body fell, lifeless, and she staggered back into the smoke. John pulled her to her feet, shouting above the roar of battle, "Stay inside if you want to live!" But she shook her head, eyes blazing with something he hadn't seen before. "We are already dead if we do nothing." The night stretched long, filled with fire and blood. By the time the ship began to retreat, dragging the last of its drones back into the sky, the ranch was scarred and broken. Smoke curled from blackened wood, fences lay torn, and the fields were cratered with fire. John stood in the ashes, shotgun still hot in his hands, his chest heaving. The widows emerged slowly, their faces pale, their eyes wide as they looked at the destruction. They expected to find only ruin. Instead, they saw him still standing, framed by smoke and flame. The human who had lived alone for years had turned his quiet ranch into a graveyard for hunters. For the first time, the fear in their eyes gave way to something else: hope. The ranch smoldered under the pale light of dawn. Ash drifted in the breeze, settling over broken fences and scorched earth. John stood among the ruins, his body aching, armor scorched, his hands blackened with soot. The battle had ended, but silence did not feel like victory. It felt heavy, weighting, as if the hunters had only stepped back to watch him suffer. The widows gathered near the ruined porch, their faces streaked with smoke and fear. Some tended to the wounded among them, wrapping burns and cuts with strips of cloth torn from their own garments. The leader approached John, her eyes grim, her voice carrying the weight of a truth she could no longer hide. "You deserve to know why they will never stop. It is not only because we refuse them. It is because of what we carry." She motioned, and the woman clutching the glowing child stepped forward. The cloth shifted, and the small figure inside stirred. Its faint light grew stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat that filled the air. John's chest tightened. He had seen strange weapons in the war, devices that destroyed cities with a single command, but nothing like this. The leader lowered her voice. "This child is the last of a line they fear. Her father was no ordinary soldier. He was a scientist, a builder of weapons greater than empires. Before he was executed, he placed his final secret into her blood. A code, a design, a weapon they cannot control. As long as she breathes, they cannot rest." John stared at the child, his hands curling into fists. He wanted to curse, to shout, to tell them they had dragged a war into his home for something he never asked to protect. But the child shifted in her mother's arms, tiny fingers reaching out into the smoky air, as innocent as any life he had ever seen. He swallowed his anger, but it burned inside him. "You used me," he growled, his voice low. "You brought this to my land because you knew they'd never search here. You knew a human was the only shield left to you." The leader did not deny it. She bowed her head, her silver hair falling forward. "Yes, we chose you because you are the one thing they cannot predict. But we also chose you because you once fought for what was right, even when it cost you everything. We hope that man still lived." Her words cut deep, pulling open wounds he thought had healed. He turned away, staring at the blackened fields. For years, he had tried to bury his past under soil and silence. Now it rose again, demanding he face it. Inside the house, the child's glow brightened further, casting strange shadows on the walls. Some of the women whispered that it was dangerous, that the child's presence itself was a signal calling hunters back. Others argued that she was hope, a weapon against the tyrants who ruled their world. Their voices clashed until John silenced them with a glare. "If what you say is true," he muttered, "then they will never stop. Not until they have her. Not until they've burned this place to the ground." The leader met his eyes. "Then we fight together or we die apart." The words hung in the air, heavy and unshakable. John wanted to refuse, to send them away before his land became nothing but ash. But when he looked at them, 11 faces hollowed by grief, 11 pairs of eyes carrying both fear and defiance. He knew the decision was already made. He walked back into the barn, pushing open the door to where his old war chest lay under a tarp. He pulled it open, the smell of oil and steel rising from within. Weapons, maps, devices he had sworn to never touch again gleamed in the dim light. His hands trembled as he reached inside, but when he lifted the first rifle, they steadied. The widows watched from the doorway, past their eyes wide, their breaths caught. One whispered softly, as if the sight itself was too much to believe, "The human will fight again." And in that moment, John knew there was no turning back. His quiet life was gone. In its place stood the battlefield once more, and this time the war had followed him home. The sun dipped low, bleeding red across the broken fields, and the ranch stood scarred but alive. Smoke still curled from the barn, fences lay in splinters, and the earth bore the wounds of fire and battle. Yet within the ruin, voices rose, soft, steady, no longer trembling with fear. The widows moved with purpose now, carrying water, stacking wood, tending the wounded. Their eyes no longer searched for escape. They looked to John. He sat on the porch steps, the rifle across his lap, watching the horizon where the hunters had vanished. His body ached with every breath, but his mind was sharper than it had been in years. He could feel it. The fight wasn't over. The first wave had tested him. The next would bring the storm. The leader came to him, her silver hair tangled by the wind, her face pale but steady. She stood without bowing this time, without the weight of a beggar. Her words were simple. "You could send us away. No one would blame you. But if you keep us here, they will return with more than hunters. They will return with armies." John's gaze didn't leave the horizon. "I know." Silence stretched between them until she lowered her voice. "Then why? Why choose our fight?" He finally looked at her, his eyes hard, his voice low. "Because I'm done running. Because I buried my past in this soil, and now it's clawed its way out. Because no one else will stand for you." He paused, his jaw tightening. "And because I'm tired of being alone." The words struck her deeper than any weapon. She lowered her head, not in shame, but in respect. Behind her, the other widows gathered, their faces lit by the glow of the child. The little one stretched its arms toward John, the faint light flickering like fire on his worn armor. The mother carried it closer, and for the first time she did not flinch when he touched the child's small hand. Warmth spread through him, not just from its strange glow, but from the life it carried. A fragile, innocent spark the hunters would kill without mercy. That night they sat together by the fire, no longer divided by fear. They spoke of their husbands, of battles lost and worlds abandoned. They asked John of Earth, of wars long past, of why humans were feared and hated yet still endured. He answered little, but each word carried weight, and they listened as though his silence held more power than their voices. When the flames burned low, the leader said what none had dared before. "We are widows, you are alone, but together we are not broken." The others nodded, their eyes reflecting the fire. For the first time, John felt something stir in his chest that was not anger, not grief, something closer to belonging. He rose and walked to the window, staring into the darkness. Somewhere out there, ships were gathering. He knew it as surely as he knew the calluses on his own hands. The galaxy would not ignore them. It would come for the widows, for the child, and now for him. But he was ready. The ranch was no longer just a place of silence. It was no longer his prison. It had become a fortress, a home worth defending, filled with voices that gave meaning to his fight. The loneliness that had haunted him for years was gone, replaced by a bond forged in fire and blood. When dawn came, John tightened the straps of his armor, the widows standing behind him in quiet strength. The child's glow shimmered against the morning light, casting long shadows across the ruined fields. The war would come again, but this time he would not face it alone.